All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Near Media podcast with Mike and Greg today. And this is episode 211. This is the end of a challenging week for me, at least, but TGIF in this case. And what about you, Mike? Got any plans for the weekend?
It's Friday for me, too.
Yeah, as it is for most people.
You probably won't hear this till Saturday or Monday, so. Whatever.
Yeah, right. All right. Anyway, so thank you to our sponsor, GatherUp, for supporting the podcast. We very much appreciate their support, and you should go check them out, gatherup.com. And Mike was a founder of GatherUp, although originally it was called Get 5 Stars.
Get 5 stars, yes.
And GatherUp,
I remember Yelp objected to the name because it implied fraud from Yelp's point of view. I remember talking to a Yelp.
They wanted you to change your business name because they
thought that they just felt that the name itself reeked of fraud.
Because you were going to get 5 stars for people.
5 stars, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, hello. That was
okay. Yeah. All right. So here we are. Today we're going to be talking about the suspension trends in the forum and some interesting insights around why they are going up again. We're going to talk about some survey data that I've collected about specifically right now about AI and local, and then we're going to talk about Apple, Siri, and the role of AI in the future of the Apple product. So Mike, take it away.
Sure. So in March or April, I think, we reported on the suspension situation with Google, how it had gone up for the past year. And there was this issue, Google called it a bug with bulk listings getting suspended, causing this March peak. They fixed the bulk issue. It was dumb because essentially, I don't think it was a bug. I think they were just applying their trust and suspension algorithm to bulk listings like they were to every other listing. So it wasn't a bug. It was a feature. It just meant that nobody could unsuspend. So I thought in the March, April timeframe that suspensions were starting to decline. But it appears that that's not the case. When I go back and look, all they did was remove bulks from the suspension, but the rate of suspension, at least in the forums as reported, is still very high. Now, when you look at the distribution of topics in the forums over the last month, the biggest number is suspensions. But the next biggest two numbers are verification and name change, which are essentially the same issue as suspension, is that you have to successfully get through video verification in the case of verifications where people are having trouble, which is the exact same end game in suspension. You get suspended, you can't get back through the video verification, and so you go to the forum. And the name or address change is essentially, again, it's for whatever reason not triggering a re-verification, but it will. And so more than half of the forum posts are in one way or another related to Google's verification process and the new video verification process. And what I am speculating, but from looking at this a lot over many years and these trends, is that, and seeing what Google has done, that they have fully automated, finally, removed human intervention from video verification. Essentially, they have created this system where you are expected to upload XYZ documents, videotape XYZ proof of your existence, that you control a location, that you're at a location. And the AI looks at it and looks for very specific things. And if those specific things are missing, you can't fulfill the verification or get out of suspension by fulfilling the verification requirements. So, in early April, we talked about not touching your listing because, particularly in home services, any breathing on a listing causes them to get suspended. I think the suspension trend is going to continue. I believe that Google is looking to re-verify any business that they don't have complete trust in, which means most of the home service businesses. And so given that, I think that the issue really comes down to having on hand the documents you need for this AI-driven video verification system to work. You need matches between your business name and your address. So if you're working out of your home, you need a business license or a tax certificate or insurance that matches your business name and the address. And the same true for utilities. So if you're if you're if you're running your business out of your home, if you're a service area business and you're Joe Smith and your Southern Tier house washing, whatever documents you provide to Google have to have your business name and your address, not just your address. And so I think a lot of people fall prey to that. You also have to be able to prove that you actually run this business. Oops, sorry, I'm having some police emergency in the background. You have to prove you run this business, so you need to access some locked facility. So you may, in the case of the Southern Tier home washing business, you need to be able to access a locked truck and show the home washing equipment. Now, just as a side note, you could do that from a remote location that's in the center of the area you're servicing. You could actually show your truck on site and have your documents with you on site. And then your service area business would be in that location as opposed to the home location address which you are hiding. And that's actually a good tactic if you're a service area business and your home is outside of your service area. You want to take all the documents with you, take your truck with you, take your marketing materials with you, lock the truck, get on site in the middle of your marketing area and do the video verification from there. And then Google will use that location as the center of your ranking.
And you're confident that this approach is not going to get dinged by Google?
I'm not confident of anything with Google. They've changed the rules all the time. Whenever.
Well, but I mean, you're making a recommendation to people that's very specific, and you feel like pretty.
Yeah, no, it's how it works. In other words, with a service area business, they hide your address, but they rank you from wherever you verified. It doesn't mean that you have to, and if you're a service area business, Google gets that you may not be verifying from your home because you may be in a mobile truck, for example. So Google allows a mobile verification to take place. And I'm recommending, one, that you have these documents in order now, because if you haven't been suspended, you will be. And two, you have a plan in place to get this verification done in the middle of your service area, not from your home if it's outside of that service area. I mean, I ran into this again, because I'm in the forum, I get a lot of private outreach, and I ran into this issue with somebody who originally verified at the partner's house, and then they decided to verify at the warehouse. They got out of town. They lost all their ranking. Then they got suspended. And so we drove them through this process, and it was successful. So at least...
Meaning the remote verification.
The mobile remote verification. Now, the other thing that they ended up doing was actually putting signage in at a location to help cement this thing. It's something that if you can prove that you're bricks and mortar by having real signage in your front yard, that helps. So whatever. So anyways, I don't see suspensions as, they're going up again. I see them as staying at this fairly high level. And I think there's a reason for it because it doesn't cost Google anything to do it. There's other than some bandwidth. So I think that is, it used to be a cost on a postcard that was very expensive, or custom human, which is very expensive. Now that it's all automated, but the trick with automation is you've got to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed and your I's crossed and your T's dotted to get through it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm coughing here. I'm having some allergic reaction to something.
It's okay.
All right. Okay, so very interesting. And any way for people to, do you think that people are going to try and fake verifications in any way?
Yes,
I mean, it would be stupid to do that, but try to trick the AI.
Yeah. So there was a case that came up in the forum. I run a silver group with other forum product experts where we share problems and issues. And the first thing he showed was a truck that had a photoshopped logo on it. And then the next thing he found was a Australian electric bill that had been totally spoofed, and the AI misspelled a bunch of words in the electric bill. So
that's fairly obvious catch,
right? But it got through verification.
It did.
And then I went and looked though, and I found a company that's selling in PDF form the exact same electric bill with all the spelling correct, so for $5. So if you don't want to use AI to misspell your electric bill in Australia, you can
new cottage industry.
New cottage industry, $5 for a bill, and you fill in the blanks. So yes, There is fraud and AI is involved, although you don't need AI. You can use Microsoft Word and a good template.
Okay, so let's move on to some interesting data. Can you see that, Mike, on the screen?
I can.
All right. So this comes out of a survey I did for another program that I run. It's the second such consumer survey, kind of pitting AI and search against each other and asking people's opinions of the quality of each and a bunch of other questions. The last one was in November. This one was just a couple of weeks ago, just pulled it Monday. And we're just going to focus on a kind of discrete issue here. Do you use AI to search for local information? 65% said yes. Last time it was 62%. So some change, not a huge change. But what's interesting is that among like top 20 AI use cases that we asked people about, local was pretty far down the list. So it was like 17 or 18. I forget what the precise number was, but it was pretty far down. I think one of the reasons for that is that the quality of local data that's available, even on ChatGPT, is not great. But we'll talk about that in a second. So we asked people what within the local search activity that you're doing on mostly ChatGPT, but Gemini also. What are you searching for? And here are the top 10 categories. Restaurants was number one, sort of health and medical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So people are doing all kinds of local searches. It would be interesting to compare this to what the hierarchy of search volume on Google is, which I don't know off the top of my head, but I mean, certainly restaurants is one of the top categories. So people seem to be doing very similar kinds of behavior as they are on Google. But again, this is a kind of small use case for AI currently versus other kinds of things like informational research and even product comparisons. So then
But
this is
that's
pretty.
probably due to the lack of quality of local results in
Yes,
ChatGPT, in
yes,
Perplexity, in Claude, even in
yes.
Gemini.
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now in terms of local search, it's pretty much ChatGPT and Gemini, and not so much Claude, Grok, Meta. Although I don't know about Meta, a lot of people do use that, but I suspect it's not for local search. So then we asked, after you've done a local search or a local business lookup on AI, what do you then do? And so the number one thing that people are saying they do is that they go to Google Maps and they're looking for contact information, reviews, or directions, which is very, very interesting. And it speaks to a product gap in ChatGPT in particular. I mean, presumably Gemini has this information. It does have this information. And certainly the AI mode gives you this information. But
Although it gives it to you erratic formats,
yeah,
inconsistent formats,
right.
you don't, with some issues. It's not as good as just a regular local search in Google Maps or even in the browser.
Right. And then the next two are interesting. People went to a local website. They went to an individual business website, and then the next thing they did was that they physically visited a business. So there's some number of people who are doing these lookups or search queries on ChatGPT, for example, and then showing up at a business, and the business is probably going to have no concept of that at all.
Right, which demonstrates too, again, the low funnel sort of intentional commercial intent of these queries, right?
Right, and I think there's a couple of interesting things here to think about. One of which is one would think that ChatGPT understands this problem, that they have a product gap, and that they would make an effort to close it by improving the quality of their local information. I mean, they made public statements when they initially rolled out search as part of ChatGPT, whenever that was. I don't even know now, like last year at some point. They said, well, we're going to do local, we're going to do shopping as well. And they did have, I think at the time, some local information, which implies that they're going to focus some energy and money on trying to upgrade this experience, which could have an impact on Google, certainly. There is some migration of informational search, top of the funnel search from Google to ChatGPT. And there so if ChatGPT can improve this local experience, you would think that some additional amount of search activity would go there and not to Google. What we see in the data is people saying, yes, I'm using AI more. I expect to use it more in the future. But a portion of the audience is, which has increased versus our November survey, is using Google more as well. which, you know, kind of contradicts the zero sum narrative that you get, like it's ChatGPT versus Google. What seems to be happening is that there's complementary behavior emerging where people do informational lookups. Uh, they're doing sort of comparisons or the consideration phase of the funnel, and then they're going to Google to execute or to transact or to get this lower funnel information. So it's a pretty interesting behavior pattern that seems to be
Right.
emerging.
And I think historically, and I think now it's even more the case, Google is going to attempt to demonstrate that that last click was generated
It
from
was
Google, right?
theirs. Yeah.
Was theirs, right? Even when it's part of a bigger, more confusing, mixed up funnel. But also in that Google risks losing the sort of standard bearer for information retrieval. And the way I see AI playing out in local is a full funnel experience, starting with
Right.
large informational queries, driving down to a
The
specific
store or product
store
or
or
whatever.
product or a path for the person, a purchase path, for at least the commercially viable ones, or at least where there's a need. And I think yesterday I gave an example of my healthcare, right? I'm looking up a big question. I do exploration about the big question, then about the techniques to treat it, and then who's expert in it and where am I going to find these experts, that kind of, and then ultimately I need to call a doctor. I mean, that kind of full funnel experience. Maybe it isn't even the highest percentage, though, right? I mean, maybe people already know what they're going to buy. Maybe they already know the
Well,
brand, and maybe
sometimes
Google is
sometimes
just
they do.
taking
Sometimes
the
they do. I
cream
think
off the
it's
top by getting the driving directions at the end.
I think it's category dependent to some degree. I mean, the top use case for AI in a sort of search context is this top of funnel research that people are doing, and then people are moving into the middle of the funnel. There's plenty of evidence that people are doing product comparisons, asking about product A versus product B, or which is the best product. So they've done some preliminary research, and now they're looking to make a choice. So the sort of, I think that the use cases are migrating down the funnel. Right now, there just isn't. Perplexity has some shopping tools, and you can ask explicitly for websites and stuff, but the bottom of the funnel is not well managed. I mean, the agent scenario, ChatGPT has operator, and all of these sites are developing agents which will presumably, including Google, presumably transact for you or take some action on your behalf. But those are immature. But that's a very interesting thing to contemplate. And in this survey, people expressed interest in that kind of capability as well.
The other risk to Google is something David mentioned yesterday when we were chatting, is that if people are coming to Google just for this brand search to look up the location, that deprecates the value of the ads that can be placed
Commercially,
against
right,
it. So
right.
while there still can be ads placed against it, they're worth a lot less because, one, people have largely made up their mind, and two,
Fewer
they know
clicks,
who and what they want. And so
right.
the ad placed against it isn't as valuable as an ad placed against a middle of the
Category
funnel
search or
or a
something. Yeah.
category search or something. So Google risks reducing the value of their ad inventory if they don't
Well,
maintain a fuller funnel sort of attraction to the searcher.
right. And they're obviously trying to address that with AI mode and AI overviews. And in this survey, we asked about AI overviews, not AI mode, because we felt that wasn't not enough people had been exposed yet. But in terms of AI mode, people like it. People say that they like it, in contrast to SEOs who don't like it. But the general public seems to like AI overviews, which would suggest, and people like the conversational experience of AI generally, which would suggest that people will like AI mode, and they may turn to AI mode in certain cases to get that AI experience that they're currently having on ChatGPT or Gemini, and that could save Google's bacon, as it were.
Although the local, I mean, the difficulty is that local has done well in a knowledge graph. In other words, as a
Yep.
structured database. Now, the algorithm that they've developed is not as sort of flexible as we might like. It's very brittle. But in terms of accuracy of things like hours and location and driving directions, that very structured approach of a knowledge graph has turned out to be very successful. And AI has difficulty matching that. So the real strength is going to come when you AI and the knowledge graph through some sort of RAG technology or whatever can integrate to get the sort of reliability of local as it is now integrated with the more fluid conversational path to that decision. And there aren't many companies in the world that can
do that.
do that.
Right. I mean, and that's exactly what Google is saying. That's exactly, I mean, Sundar Pichai has been on this kind of interview PR tour coming out of Google I/O the last, month or so, where he's done 4 interviews, high profile interviews, and he's talked explicitly about the relationship between AI mode and search. And they're trying to do exactly what you're saying.
Right. I mean, they are grounding AI mode in search, which is understandable because search for them is a huge benefit, right? They have knowledge about every website. They have knowledge about how popular those websites are. They have knowledge about driving directions to every location. They know how far people are willing to drive to go to Barbarella for jewelry, those kinds of things. So they have knowledge and data that gives them a huge advantage if they can integrate that successfully. But it's a hard problem. And I
Yeah,
think
I agree.
as you see them not being all that successful in it early out of the chute, I mean, to some extent, they've drafted on ChatGPT's willingness to break down the truthfulness barrier, right? I mean, ChatGPT rushed out early product, a lot of hallucinations, and said, "Hey, it's going to hallucinate. So what? Have a good time." And Google was afraid to bring a product out in that context with that limitation. But they drafted on ChatGPT, sort of softening the market, making those kinds of odd
Well,
behaviors acceptable.
and AI overviews are full of inaccuracy and
Full of
hallucination.
inaccuracies. And it's because it's a difficult problem. And it's one where it relates to Apple, they didn't want to step into.
Right. Well, so speaking of Apple, Apple had its developer conference this week, and there was little or no mention. I didn't watch the whole keynote, but little or no mention of Siri, and lots of talk of Apple Intelligence. They're letting developers build on top of it. They lots of talk about design updates and OS updates. They did talk about a lot of things tied into Apple Intelligence, but not Siri. So Siri was last year. They promised a lot of improvements in Siri, the integration of ChatGPT loosely defined, and other third-party LLMs like Gemini, which didn't materialize. So there were sort of 2 reactions to the keynote this week. One was, well, they didn't say anything about Siri. They're behind. They're flailing. They talked about vaporware. The other one was, they're doing the right thing, sort of pulling back and being more measured about all of this. And one question really is, what do people expect from Apple around AI? Could the consumer, not the pundit class? And how important is a ChatGPT style experience to Apple, whether it's Siri based or alternative? And does Apple now need to make some radical move like buying somebody? I don't know who they would buy exactly that's affordable. These companies are all super expensive at this point.
To me, it's a platform and it's a way to get things done. And they've made $20 billion a year not doing search.
Right, which is not going to be the case in the future.
Well, but maybe they can make $20 billion a year not doing a chat AI. In other words, once ChatGPT develops an advertising model and Perplexity an advertising model, and Gemini has successfully implemented an advertising model, and AI mode has too, they're all going to want distribution, and Apple can leverage it. So there is some possibility that they will never really need a ChatGPT level chat interface. They do need AI, and their approach to AI, to me, Siri excluded, is rational. They're giving developers access to on-device AI free of charge. So all of these, they're smaller models, so they're not quite as sophisticated as ChatGPT because there's fewer parameters, but it's free and it's private, and apps can now access that. So the examples they gave was you have a note-taking app that has all of your data on your phone, ask it to create a quiz to help you study for your exam, and it creates a quiz or flashcards or whatever, right? And I don't believe, and then they did the same thing with a trail program. You've downloaded maps for a certain area and you're looking for a 3-hour walk that is moderate intensity and you can take your child on it, whatever. And it uses the onboard AI to do that. To me, that's a very powerful strategy because every app then on your phone can be both enhanced with that capability and private. So that to me is a very great long-term strategy. The other thing they're clearly doing is they're improving the integration with ChatGPT, which I think is critical.
So far it's a pretty lame experience.
It's very, it's too bifurcated. It's too, here's ChatGPT and here's your phone, and the two don't interact that well, and it's a overlay, right? So you do it, and it's transient. It's not there for you to it's as transient as Siri is. So there's where a better Siri interface would dramatically improve that interaction. Now, after the conference, when they didn't talk about Siri at the conference, they did go on the interview uh,
Right.
tour,
Craig Federini.
and
Yep.
particularly Joanna Stern from Wall Street
Wall
Journal
Street.
did a very fun. I thought it was a fun interview where Apple got to explain why they had vaporware, or why the vaporware wasn't vaporware. Although, I mean, the definition of vaporware isn't that it doesn't exist; it's that the software didn't ship. It hasn't shipped yet, so it is in fact vaporware. But they explained how they got there. They had this two-stage
Right.
level of Siri improvement. They realized stage one was shit. They weren't going to release it. They thought
Right.
they
So
would be
their
done with
their
it.
their statement was like, quality. We're concerned about quality, and so we're not gonna. We'll sell no wine before it's time, as
Right.
Orson
But
Welles used to say.
so, an enhanced Siri is still sometime in 2026. They left the impression it was spring 2026, but what they actually said was 2026. 2026 is a long year, right?
Yeah, we're still midway in 2025.
Right. So the enhanced Siri is a ways off. Meanwhile, they are building in device level AI to, you could call it catching up with Google. For example, that you can now do a screenshot and then learn about the content of that. So very similar to what Google is doing. But there's a lot of commercial sort of relevance to those kinds of techniques going forward, and it's built in at a system level. So a shopping app you could do a screen capture on Etsy, and an onboard shopping app could find out where else that product's available and what its price is, those kinds of things. So clearly they're moving forward with enhancements to the user experience, which to me is and they're moving forward as a platform, and they have the distribution. So I'm perfectly happy continuing to use ChatGPT as an app on my phone. And so I don't know that I need Siri to be smarter, but I don't need her to be a chat companion. I don't want to be
Well,
talking about my woes with Siri.
yeah, I think that the thing. So Siri for me works about 70% of the time. Like there are times when it just doesn't respond or it doesn't do the thing that you're asking it to do for whatever reason. It fails or I find it to be, I find there's a gap between the voice assistant experience that you get from the Chat GPT advanced voice mode, just in terms of utility, and Siri. And Siri just looks very bad by comparison. But what Apple needs to do is use Siri as a tool to control the phone, accomplish things with the phone that simplifies the experience. The phones have become, there's so many layers, so many controls, so many capabilities that people just don't even know about or don't know how to access. And so Siri needs to be the simple way to do things on your phone. I need to do this. I want to change this setting. I want to accomplish this objective. And that should be the primary way in which you access that information. Not I have to go to settings and then I have to figure out the menu and then I have to go down and then I mean it's just become kind of a very challenging thing to take to accomplish. This phones are too complicated now. I mean, maybe that's I'm now generationally incapable of
Challenged.
doing yes, generationally challenged. But I think that at a minimum, I would rather have Siri just be a really reliable way to get things done on the phone, schedule things, control settings, what have you, than have it be some duplicate of ChatGPT where I can ask.
And I think
To,
that's where Siri is going. I think it's going to be a struggle getting there. That being said, I have continued to use Siri throughout, starting in about 2015, just to understand the level of natural language
Mhm.
processing it has, to see where it makes mistakes. And over the past year, and I use it in the voice access mode, which is a extra level where when you share, for example, a HomePod with another person, it does voice verification. So it knows that it's you versus the other person. And initially, the voice verification was very unreliable. Like I would have to confirm everything. But over a year's time, it learned me, and it learned me fairly well. So now my interactions with my shopping lists are much smoother, much better. It has a much better sense of the variation in my voices. I might wake up with a gravelly voice one day and a
Morning
less
voice.
gravelly voice another. And it's doing a much better job with those variations. That being said, I'm also noticing throughout these changes that there are new bugs being introduced. It's not a linear process. That's all to say that taking a ChatGPT like experience, which is written from the ground up from an LLM AI chat point of view, versus trying to retrofit a task
Right.
driven structured assistant is a very difficult problem. Amazon has
Right.
not solved the problem.
Right.
They claim that they're solving the problem and it will be solved this year, but it hasn't been quick for them either. Google nuked their assistant because they didn't want to even deal with the problem, right? And so Apple has bitten off a very difficult path. I don't envy them integrating this new AI, LLM, natural language
Well, I
processing
mean,
with the old system.
yeah, they clearly underestimated. They
How hard it would
clearly,
be. Yes.
well, I think that, but they also underestimated the demand for AI, just the need for them to be competitive in this arena. One thing that
I mean, who competitive with whom? I mean, Alexa still isn't shipping.
yeah, but
Google is starting from scratch. They totally nuked the assistant and replaced it with Gemini. I mean, the game starts today. It didn't
well,
start, and ChatGPT doesn't have distribution. So yes, they are a model of what can happen.
Well, ChatGPT doesn't have mobile distribution other than its app, but they have, whatever their number is now, 700 million, 800 million
monthly users. We don't know what that means, right? Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, whatever, you will not find a person who has not used ChatGPT or doesn't know what it is. And
it speaks to an excellent sort of go-to-market strategy, an excellent marketing strategy, an excellent ability to elevate in a very noisy market. And they've brought it to the phone and they have a good relationship with Apple. So, but they had to pay how many billions to get Johnny Ive's company to maybe build a hardware product? $6.5 billion. And so they're pretty far out on this thing too.
Well, we could go on and talk about this.
But I mean, it's interesting because it shows us what's possible and it sets your expectations much higher. Which is good.
I want to make 2 points. One is that ChatGPT
I'm not going to let you.
Yeah, it seems like it. ChatGPT is conditioning people to expect a different user experience, which is what Google is reacting to, obviously.
Yes.
And also on the Apple sort of NLP front, one of my enormous pet peeves is that when you dictate a text or when you dictate something, it's I'm not technical enough to tell you what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, it's speech to text, obviously, but they are not understanding context enough to get the recognition right in many cases. This seems like a perfect job for AI, right? I mean, what AI does in theory, I don't necessarily think this is a total explanation, is just use an enormous amount of information to quote unquote predict the next word in the sequence. I don't believe that is the explanation for how these things work. But if that is true, what should be happening is people understanding context and not treating a word phonetically or not like coming up with gobbledygook when it doesn't understand what you're saying,
No question that I think this bar has been set higher and ChatGPT said it. I think that's a good thing. But also the device that's in our pockets is our phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android, and neither one of them have fully realized the potential of this. And right now it's all aspirational.
Well, right. I mean, I don't think it's entirely aspirational.
Not entirely aspirational. I mean, it's creating in us a desire for the Star Trek, device that we've always wanted. And we'll get there, but it's 3 years out,
And you can experience a version of that with ChatGPT where you can just you can talk to it for an hour about whatever and it will respond to you without, a hot word. You don't have to reinitiate the query, right? Okay, Google, blah, blah, blah. Okay, hey, Alexa, hey, Siri, okay, Siri, whatever. All these devices in the background that I've got in the other room are going to start coming at me. Oh, I was going to say one final thing, but I've now forgotten what it is. So on that auspicious note, do you want to say anything before we go?
I mean, to me, all of this speaks to the inflection point that marketing is at. And it's scary, but it doesn't change the real importance of doubling down on brand building, making sure that your brand represents this stuff correctly, on your location information, and make sure that's all represented correctly, not just at Google, but at Apple, and at Bing now,
Bing Places,
sakes, at
Bing Places,
Yelp and TripAdvisor, because we know ChatGPT relies on those third parties really heavily. So everything that we've done for the last 10 years it isn't gone away, and Google's never going to throw it away, right? Like when you look at how AI mode is working,
Well,
it's grounded in search.
right.
And now
And
maybe search becomes 25% of it instead of 95% of it, but there's still
yeah, but I mean, GBP and reviews in particular become even more important
more
now.
important. So all the things that we've done, I mean, I guess it's disturbing to talk about how disruptive things are at the moment and to think about how much they're going to change over the next 36 months. They're changing. But two things that aren't changing. One is the basics you need to do. And two is there's still going to be one of two phones in your pocket, either an Android or an iPhone, right? Over the
Well, and
next 36 months.
interestingly, there was some data from Bright Edge that showed 90+% of traffic driven by AI engines, LLMs, whatever you want to call them, is coming from the desktop, with the exception of Android phones, where the mobile number is higher because Google has aggressively, put
Stuck it
Gemini
in every
on
place.
those, stuck it in every nook and cranny that it can. Okay, so I am gone next week for a much needed break, and I don't know. We may have an encore episode or a rerun, as it were, depending
Or
on
you
what you
may just
decide.
get me, for Christ's
Yeah,
sake.
or Mike. Mike sort of just
In all my glory.
yes. All right. Well, that's up to you. Anyway, thanks again to Gather Up for sponsoring the podcast. Thanks for listening as always, and we will see you next time.